Hi, my name is Bill Simmons, Artistic Director of the Phoenix Theater Cultural Center, and today I am talking with Tommy Lewey. He is a professional dancer. He was in my inaugural Sanford Meisner acting class that I taught through the Phoenix from 2014 to 2016, I think.
hmm
Seems like a million moons ago. And I'm going to be talking to Tommy today about how his dance has evolved since taking my Meisner class and how he incorporates some of the Meisner tools into the work he's doing. But first, how are you, Tommy?
I'm good. I'm really good.
Are
2020 has
you?
been like complete dumpster fire for me, at least creatively, been able to make work and stuff like that. So that's exciting, especially when we were in a time when we weren't sure if anything was going to like how making theater and making work would look like with everything that's going on. So I'm feeling very happy, very lucky, and fulfilled. Yeah, I'm good.
That's good. That's good. So how has the work evolved for you during the pandemic? I mean, like, how are you creating work when most of us are still stuck in our homes and, theaters are closed, but certainly professional theaters are closed and
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I've like affectionately referred to like everything that's happening right now as kind of like a creative timeout for me. Just was a nice because I don't know, I didn't feel the necessity to like make work from home or um, I don't know, like I don't know. A lot of people got really creative about how they wanted to make work, and for me, it was more of a time to kind of sit and maybe analyze and think about work and how I make it and what is important to me as we continue as now as I'm moving forward to start making work again. So I don't know if that answers your question or at all,
I
but
think so. Yeah, I'm in the similar. I think a lot of artists are in this, but I'm in a very similar place. I mean, I've spent so much of this year kind of doing the administrative side of Phoenix things.
sure.
Worked on a new strategic business plan. We're getting ready to work on a major fundraising feasibility study. We're doing board recruitment. We're putting plans together to have an outdoor stage in our parking lot beginning in April and May. Um, and I'm just now kind of getting back to the artistic side of the Phoenix, which is reading plays for future productions, building a pipeline of new work. I want to train some artists in the community in devised work, like how we create devised work. And I want to bring in somebody who specializes in that from Chicago to teach us virtually, so that we have a group of artists who can start building work that's more community based. Because professional theater, we find a script, we audition the script, we find the designers, the director, we audition we make choices, and we're pretty much doing our interpretation of a finished work. And I'd like to start creating work that comes from the community that speaks to specific ideas that we're confronting, or whether it's local or national or
Mhm.
global, but how it speaks to the artists in Indianapolis. And so that's really exciting to me. And it's just taking a lot of work. And the thing about 2021 or 2020 for me is just admit you don't know a bunch of stuff. Just admit you don't know a lot of stuff, and don't pretend you know that stuff. Actually find people who are trained to teach you, in the same way, that's why I started teaching Meisner.
Really need to say that because like I think a lot of the things that is my mindset right now has been focusing on like I think for a long time I projected this like notion or this like mentality of like I've got everything together. I know what I'm doing. I know how to make this happen. I have X and Y Z accreditations and all this stuff, so I'm good. I've got it, and I had to project this idea that I'm like a know-it-all and I've got all of my stuff together. When really it's just like it's okay that you don't, and you're kind of making it up as you go along, and that's okay too.
Yeah. I
You
think the more of us who had just admitted, it's like, okay, I pretend that I've got this all figured out. Um, but I don't. I think the more of us who actually verbalize that, the better. I think the healthier the world would be. But certainly we artists who are also, I mean, I'm also an administrator, but you have to commodify what you do in order to make any kind of money at it, right? You got to assign a value to it. And yeah, so it's 2020 has been a really, I mean, it's been a horrendous year, but it's also been a good year for, I think, those artists who are paying attention, be just like, you know what? I don't have to put stuff out right now. And it seems like a lot of people still are putting stuff out. I'm like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, because it's like, well, if we're not making work, then are we really artists? And it's like, well, yeah, no, you're always still going to be an artist, even though just right now you're not able to make work the way that you think you might want to. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense, and it brings me to my question: is so very shortly we're going to show a piece that you created and filmed, and it's starting to get distributed around the country. And I know a friend of mine in Chicago, Olivia Lilly, who actually specializes in device theater, is very excited about your work. So talk to me a little bit about the piece that we're about to see, and then we're going to show an excerpt. But how did this piece come to be?
It's actually, this is an adaptation of an old work that I made in 2011. Actually, and it was a piece I made with a friend of the Phoenix, Michael Burke, and one of my lifelong friends and probably forever collaborator. We made this piece back in 2011. It was a piece called Red Couch, and the piece was about looking at a relationship as you see it develop through kind of the moments that you share with a potential lover on a couch. And so I've done this show many times with No Exit Performance. It took me abroad to Israel, and I toured the show in Israel. That was exciting. And then, this is like the most recent version of Red Couch. It's a much shortened version because I filmed it for a program called Men and Dance. It was a virtual dance festival, and they only wanted it to be 6 minutes. So the challenge was to take this 50-minute feature live theater performance and condense it into a 4 to 6 minute video. And so that's what I made a couple months ago, was this version of Red Couch. But yeah.
Well, I think we should see the video right now. So here is Tommy Lewey's Red Couch.
Mm. 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 Mm.
And that's the video. So tell us a little bit about, so you said you and Michael first created this in 2011.
Mhm.
You then decided to shorten it down, I assume like this spring, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the when I got the notification that that I had been accepted into the virtual dance festival for Men and Dance out of Seattle, they gave us sort of parameters, but also a lot of freedom within those parameters to be like, well, do what you want because this is new for us and obviously probably new for a lot of the choreographers that were featured. Um, so they said that they liked the piece, they just wanted it condensed for this virtual festival. So I thought, well, this is kind of an interesting challenge and about how do I take the important storytelling elements of the theater and turn it into a video. And it was a lot of fun. And the guy that I worked with, Charlie Borowitz, who filmed everything, was a really good collaborator and mentor because he's a videographer, and this was a whole new world for me to venture into. It was really fun to kind of see the differences and the similarities between theatrical storytelling and video storytelling, and how they're the same, but how they're very, very different. And how you can, I don't know, in theater, you always like, there's this beautiful element that you can stretch out a moment, but in video, that doesn't really work. And you have to kind of expedite the images that you see quite a bit. And that was really fun to kind of play with.
Yeah. I just think it's beautiful. You sent me kind of an advanced screening of it, I guess,
Mhm.
several months ago, and I was just completely taken with it. And my background is obviously theater, not dance, but I saw so much storytelling in it. And sometimes when I watch professional dance, I get a feeling, and my mind kind of goes with whatever my feeling is. But that was a story I completely tracked, and it's obviously nonverbal. It is set to music, and it's beautifully shot, and it's simple yet intricate, and I just found it very, very intriguing. And unfortunately, in our current age, it's like the perfect amount of viewing time for online things, because I find that Zoom fatigue is a very real thing.
Yeah.
So, so you and Michael first created this in 2011. You just filmed this spring and summer. You trained in Meisner technique with me in my inaugural, the class I first taught from 2014 to 2016. How did that inform what you and Michael started with and what materialized? Because I think that's really intriguing. You, I believe, I think are my only dancer to date. I think that's right. Is that right? And you were the only one in that class,
I'll
right?
take it. Yeah, that's fine.
Which I love. And I've had a few people who are like, I've had therapists in the class, and I've had teachers in the class. But most, by and large, they're actors, and
Mhm.
you're a dancer. So how did the Meisner work inform what we have now?
How did it inform the piece that we just saw. And
Yeah, in any way, shape, or form, and you can get as specific as you want, and I can elaborate when you talk about if you use Meisner terms, what we're talking about. But I just am curious because you've said that, right? You've told me that the Meisner training has really helped you as a choreographer.
well, not only did it help me both as a performer, regardless if I'm dancing or acting, or it that helped for sure. But in terms of like the creative process, I think for the first time, I kind of had it was kind of like a duck to water moment where I was like, I think I had always approached the work through the Meisner way. I didn't have the words or the language or the ideas behind it. I just didn't have the lexicon to like describe my process, because like the one thing that I have always taken away when we talked about cold facts or shared facts, I was like, oh, I've always been doing that. For me, a lot of, I guess you could say I approach my work a little bit more theatrically as a dancer and as a choreographer, because the first things I've always thought about, well, it's like, who's in the room? Who are they to each other? What do they want from each other? And what's going to happen when they get or don't get that? That's always been the way that I've entered all of my dance work, is thinking about the people that are in their room and who they are to each other. It's never been music or like a physical dance phrase. It's always just been like, who are these people and who are they to each other? And that's how I've always built my work. And so when you say that you are catching on to like the narrative and the storyline between the people and the piece that you saw, that makes me feel like I'm doing it successfully, and that's always been the start of my work and the foundation of it. It's like, who are these people? Who are they to each other? And then build a dance from there.
Yeah. And it felt like a journey too. I mean, I really saw the evolution of a relationship. And it was like all the things I go to the theater for. So it was touching, it was witty, it was charming, it was heartbreaking, it was intimate, it was beautiful, it was, it was all the things. And also your director and your cinematographer, and perhaps they were one of the same, but just the way it was shot was really, and edited was really, really lovely. And it feels like just what it needs to be. Like, it doesn't feel like it needs to be longer, though I could see how you could flesh this out into a longer dance piece that would be for a live audience.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was the one thing that was really rewarding about this experience, was I got to learn a different way to tell stories, and that was fun. It was really fun to kind of learn this process. And I think I've learned something about myself through this process, is that like, I think I've always, my like artistic eye like has always been like kind of a little bit more cinema, how do I say that word?
Cinematographic, I guess. Cinematographic.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, sure, we'll go with that. Cinematographic. I think my images the images in my brain when I'm choreographing or I'm directing, it's always been sort of like this. You know what I mean? And it's been really fun to like play with those new tools. The idea of like zooming in and zooming out, and like the perspective of like I don't know. It's just been fun, and I've really enjoyed it. It was just a good experience.
So how long did it take you to create this iteration? What was captured on film? I mean, from like start to finish. And
I guess you could say it was a total of like 2 days. Like we said, like we filmed it in Indie Convergence. There's space on the west side. Robert and Caitlin are great friends and super supportive. So Charlie Borowitz, the videographer that helped me film it, he and I did a day of setup, and then we did a day of shooting. So 2 days, we kind of did a wham bam, thank you ma'am kind of process. So and then a day of editing. So it took, I guess, a total of 3 days.
yeah, well, it's really lovely, and I would have thought it would actually have taken longer. So yeah, well, kudos to you. So what comes next for the film?
What comes next for it?
Yeah, like, are you trying to get it distributed, or is it just kind of out there for whoever wants to find it? Or
Well, so our friend Olivia just featured it for a small hours festival that she's been doing virtually. And currently just kind of peddling it away, and whoever picks it up, I'll happily let it be featured there.
That's awesome. That's really great. So Olivia Lilly is the artistic director of Prop Theater in Chicago, and she's become a good friend and mentor to me. She just comes from a much younger perspective than mine, and she's also an artist of color, and she specializes in devised work. And so you'll be seeing her actually around the indie, hopefully, well, once the pandemic is over. So what comes next for you as an artist? Are you just kind of hanging tight? Do you have projects in development?
Actually, so my collaborator for the film project, Charlie, he and I are talking about our next project to work together on. So that's exciting. One thing that I've been kind of researching a lot right now is kind of the accessibility of queer spaces and how that's kind of dwindling.
Yeah.
And how what that means in terms of safe space for queer people, and what that looks like for now, especially during a pandemic, and then kind of the future and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on.
That's really interesting, Tommy. Would you elaborate on that? Because this is the first time hearing this, and I'm guessing a lot of people who view this are gonna have similar questions. What are you talking about specifically? Because I think it rings a bell as if it feels right, but I don't know that I've heard anybody articulate it this way.
In terms of the accessibility of queer spaces.
Yeah, and you said the dwindling of them, and what does that mean specifically?
Well, I guess I'll describe it as the way that it happened to me, if that makes sense, because
Yeah.
for me, I've been really focusing on, my own life and my own experiences for like the future of my own work. So like right around the time that like Talbot Street and like the 501 Eagle closed, there was an interesting conversation that was happening within the community about the queer spaces and they're closing. Why are they closing? And then for me, for my age bracket, my demographic, and my experience and history with the city, I didn't know that at one point there was somewhat like 40 different gay bars at any given time, and now there's like 4 or 5. And then so I started doing research about here locally, and then I kind of expanded it, and like it's kind of affectionately known as like the death of the gay bar, but it doesn't necessarily just refer to gay bars, but like queer spaces and queer owned spaces, and how they're all either having to accept a wider demographic of people, or they're just closing entirely. And so it's just been kind of so my thought process is like, what does this look like for us now, and what will it look like for us in the future, and why is it happening, and why are these gay bars and queer spaces or queer safe spaces going away, and what does that mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, I think on one level I knew that it was happening, but I don't know, I guess I've just chalked it up to, I think progress, and that's probably a mistake, right? Is that like somehow we're becoming, at least urban environments feel, and this is just obviously my opinion, is it feels more queer friendly to some degree. But then I hadn't thought about the loss of that space, those spaces to the LGBTQ community, and not having like kind of what you call safe spaces. That's,
Well, it's a whole layered onion situation. I think the one thing, yes, like social acceptance and of gay culture and queer culture is on the rise, and that's great, and that's wonderful, and it's beautiful. But I think also it's that double-edged sword that a lot of marginalized communities have to sit on, of like acceptance versus like assimilation into society. And it's great that all these people want to come into these spaces and be together, but I've I've had a handful of like experiences where you know me or my friends have been made to feel unsafe in a space that's for them. You
Uh,
know what I mean? You
yeah.
know, there's a lot of, I mean, there's, I have a trans woman of mine, a friend of mine, like she doesn't like going out to certain bars in this community because, and I've seen it firsthand, she gets approached and gets asked incredibly invasive questions. And this is a space that's meant to be for her, and
Yeah.
it's not. And just a lot of people acting inappropriately and it's just like, well, where is the space that is safe for us? If this was meant to be for us, it's not, because like the converse doesn't exist. Like I can't really go into, say, like a Brothers or some sort of like you know major like bar and behave the same way and not expect and just be accepted. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
um like I can't, like I the dynamic isn't equal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally understand. As you're explaining it to me. Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. Well, I'll be excited to see how this project materializes. And I think this has been the exciting thing for me in 2020 is to hear artists coming at their work from a very particular point of view. And
Hmm.
I've talked to Michael Burke and I have done a one to one, and Olivia Lilly and I have done a one to one, and Lori Walter Hudson, the New Harmony Project, and um, we've and Lou Harry most recently,
Oh yeah.
and yeah, yeah, and they're all on our Facebook page if you want to check them out. But they're pretty interesting, and I've really been asking people kind of where are you now, and where do you see, how do you see your work or the work in 2021? And I just think this is gonna be a long winter because of the pandemic. Like it's gonna, I think until the election is firmly decided in somebody's favor, it's going to be even more uncertainty. I think for a lot of us, I thought within a few days after the election we'd have a pretty clear, and it's like, oh no, we're going to make this really difficult. It's like, okay, great, let's really test the hell out of this democracy. Let's really stretch it from every angle you can to see if it will indeed snap. And that
Yeah.
sort of feels like what's going on. And I think we've got that to contend with, and I think we have this pandemic to contend with. And I think that's going to still, it's just going to keep us all really uneasy and unsettled.
Yeah.
And I take heart, I guess, what I'm saying in talking to artists about how they're using this time and what they're anticipating coming back to as artists. And what you just talked to me about, Justin Sears Watson of Phoenix Rising and I had a conversation. It's just really inspiring to hear artists be like, yeah, I'm just waiting. I'm doing a lot of learning, and then I'm
Yeah.
planning, but I'm
Yeah, a lot of learning, a lot of, I guess I'll just speak from my own perspective. It's just I think I've really, and I think what I was getting a sense at a greater whole from everyone, I think we've really prioritized what's important to us with our work. I think we've had this time to really consider who we are as people and what we want as artists. I think that's super important because I think, again, I'm speaking personally, I think I got lost for a second and just like pumping out work and getting it all out there and just like throwing it out into the world. And I think sometimes you do that and you kind of lose a sense of your own identity and as a creative person when you're just like kind of trying to pump out work and get it out there and get it seen. And I think now I think maybe it's kind of like a work smarter, not harder, and work more with more purpose and intent as opposed to just like getting it out there. And maybe that could also just be, I recently dipped into my 30s, and so maybe I'm more concentrated in my efforts and not, I think when you're younger and you're in your 20s, you're just kind of um I don't know where I was going with that, but I
I
don't know.
do. I think it's like in your 20s, you're just kind of, you're still a kid in a lot of ways, and you're still like, you're kind of everywhere. And then I think, and that's how it happened to me, is I made my way through my 30s and I became I got clarity and more clarity. And actually, when I hit my 40s is when I started teaching and I started directing when I think had just turned 40, maybe when I did my first professional directing gig. And I just realized, okay, you get, I think my experience is you get more and more specialized in a good way, and and all the stuff you tried out in your 20s, you started to kind of settle in your 30s. And then I really do, I kind of think of my, when I roughly 40, 41, 42 is when I kind of hit my, I'm not saying I'm finished and this will be a lifelong journey, but I'm like, okay, I understand what I'm supposed to be doing and how do I just go about making that happen as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, and I don't know that maybe there's a little bit more a sense of a greater sense of security and like confidence in what I'm doing now, I
Yeah,
think.
I think so. That the film is just is lovely. It's such a distillation, I think, of somebody who knows what he's saying. He knows how he's saying it. He's edited it because I'm hearing it was like twice as long that you edited down into, 50% of the material you started with, and it feels really nicely done. So I think you're exactly right. And now, and here, and this is the other thing is now you have a benchmark. You have a benchmark to measure all your other work. And I think once you hit and that's the thing I've gotten to be as a director. I'm just like, I've set myself some high benchmarks, and maybe that one didn't quite get there, but I came pretty close. But it's really, I think for me, I'm like, okay, I know what works as a director now.
Mhm.
I want to continue to grow and be involved in devised work because that really excites me. It's like we don't know what we're going to end up with because we don't even have a script yet, but we have a theme, we have a thesis statement, we have an idea, and we're going to build from that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Devised work is yeah. Spent a lot of time doing devised work when I was like with no exit at that time, and that was devised work is great. I love devised work.
Yeah, devised work has become, we've been discussing it a lot around the Phoenix and particularly with artists in the community and in Chicago. So yeah, it's coming. It's coming. So the last question I'm going to ask you, Tommy, is like, so how are you getting through the pandemic? I mean, are you working? I mean, how are things, you're obviously managing.
Yeah, I think I would say so. What was funny is we went into shelter in place like 4 days before my birthday,
Oh,
and so I would say there was about a month and a half where was terrified, and I think like so many went through a huge identity crisis. But thankfully, through therapy and developing a schedule and managing myself, I've been able to stay focused and stay motivated. I've been doing a lot. I've been able to kind of create a at-home studio for myself, so I can take online dance classes and things like that to keep my body motivated and working, and then also mentally. So I think just I'm managing to keep moving forward and not feel stuck and taking pride in all the little accomplishments that I've done. You
oh,
know,
that's great. That's great. I think I'm a big proponent of therapy. Well, theater and also therapy.
because they're not the same. They're not the same.
They're not the same. They're not the same. And those of you who are in theater as therapy, it's not good therapy. I mean, it can be good therapy if you're approaching it as a tiny
It,
little element, but yeah,
it can be cathartic. It's not therapy though. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think therapy, particularly with someone you trust and who, lets you be you and you kind of address things as you deal with, I
Mhm.
think this year too is things have been bubbling up for me in a different way, but it has been good. I feel a lot of unease though still, and not just my own journey, just the journey we're all on right now. And but I have my feeling is as we start into 2021, the first couple months are probably going to be rough, but as we get into March and April, I just have this feeling, and I've had it for a very long time, even before I've been hearing the predictions on the vaccine. I've
Mhm.
just always sort of felt like the spring of 2021 is when there's going to be a flowering, I think, of art and creativity and new spaces to do the work. I think this is the pandemic in 2021, 2020 has shaken things up, and it's never going to go back to the way it was.
Well, and maybe that's the beauty of it. Maybe we were all shaken and rattled in a good way,
Yeah.
and maybe we've, as we go into the next year with the new administration and just life in general, yeah, maybe moving forward we can just move forward with a little bit more consciousness and a little bit more consideration and tenderness towards each other and the communities that we exist and are in, and maybe we can just take it and gently rock forward into the next year with very conscious intention.
Well, that's lovely, Tommy. I think on that note, we should conclude because I think anything else we say will ruin the mood.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's lovely. That's lovely. Well, Tommy, it's just so good to talk to you. And where you are as an artist is just, it opens my heart tremendously. So kudos to you.
Well, and thank you, Bill. It's lovely to see your face again. So.
Well, be well, Tommy, and just keep me posted as projects, as you're thinking about projects in 2021.
Yeah, no, I totally will. Awesome. Yeah.
See you, man.
All right. Bye, Bill.